So you got a company and you got something that needs some strategic planning. This is the episode for you because Anthony Taylor was here and he is the CEO and senior strategic planner for SME Strategy. And we were talking about like strategizing and organizations and what they need and culture and personalities and organizations, how they've reformed and be able to transform what they've been doing with their teams and how they've grown. And it was such a great conversation. I love conversation around business and leadership and strategy and all that kind of stuff. I've always loved that kind of stuff. So I think you're going to really, truly enjoy this conversation. And Anthony really just left a lot of wisdom on the table. So I want you guys to pick it up. All right, let's go. What's up, party people? This is Neena Perez, and this is Straight Talk, no sugar added. And you know that we go around this amazing planet, finding the best humans we can find to come on here to grow, challenge, and transform your thinking. And today I have somebody for y'all. So buckle up because we're going to have a good time. We're going to wake Anthony up today, okay? So joining us today is Anthony Taylor. He's the CEO and senior strategist, planning facilitator, let's speak English, at SME Strategy, a company recognized for its excellence in guiding businesses to success. Now, Anthony is not only a seasoned strategist with a background in business administration and project management, but also a passionate entrepreneur with over a decade of experience across diverse industries. He's an award-winning leader, a Global Entrepreneur Week ambassador for Canada, the author of I Wish I Knew. I wish I knew too, Anthony. I wish I knew too. All right. And he's hailing from Vancouver. Anthony brings this fresh, unfiltered approach to business strategy. And as you guys know, this is Straight Talk. So we do everything unfiltered. Anthony, welcome to Straight Talk. How are you?
I'm awesome, Neena. No, I'm excited to be here.
Right?
I'm ready to rock with you. No, I'm feeling good today and excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good. Well, I'm really glad you're here. So I know I gave like a little overview of who you are, but I really do want to get to know you. So who are you? Who are you, dude? Who are
I
you?
mean, that was pretty good. That was pretty good rap. I love the like straight talk, no chase kind of vibes. But really just been, my entire life's been dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs and business people, really help them accomplish what's most important to them, personally, professionally, doing that through the framework of strategic planning, run a consulting company that helps folks literally all over the world, create their strategic plans and helps them implement it. I'm a father of two, which is why I'm a little sleepy today. Just love getting to contribute and chat with folks like you who are just like really passionate about what they're doing. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else cool. I've taken up golf, which is pretty dope.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, but I just get to travel around, go to meetings, and just help people have breakthroughs. So I'm just excited to chat with you, and I love what you're about.
Thank you so much. So, talk to us about how you got started. How did you get started into strategic planning? Is that something that you've always done? Like, did you bumped into it? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, honestly, I'm a waiter by trade, but my kind of
I love it.
origin story is I had a business partner who ripped me off for about $100,000. He was embezzling
Mm,
money from my company,
mm,
and so I was, trying to figure out how to and I was writing like business plans and stuff, trying to help entrepreneurs like avoid the same mistakes that I had.
yeah,
And at the same
yeah,
time, I was involved in two nonprofit boards. They were very passionate people, but like it was like herding cats all the time, and we
yeah.
weren't able to have the impact we wanted to have. And so through those kind of like two converging experiences, I found strategic planning, built a process to make it like super easy for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, like not like limited to, big four consultancies. And then we've, packaged it, put in a way, approached it. And then we've been leading this for like, hundreds of people, been at it for 13, 14 years now. So yeah, we're rocking.
So talk to me about, if you don't mind, about the partnership part, right? Because I know that I have a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs that listen to the show, right? And what you've gone through, I've spoken to other entrepreneurs who have gone through that, and it hurts. It hurts like a son of a gun, right? So, talk to me about that, like because for those who are listening, right? Strategy is also including who you have around you, what you're doing, right? That kind of stuff. So, tell me what happened there if you don't mind sharing. I don't know what you can and cannot share. Like, tell me what happened there, and also how somebody can maybe avoid that kind of a pitfall or something like that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a lot of factors to it. I'd say, at the time, I was pretty young. I was ambitious. I like wanted it. So like, there's like how much excuses did I make for myself? There
Yeah,
was like checks and balances. Like the sucky part was, we had an accountant. So it was him and the accountant. Like, so
right.
I
That
thought we had like a
sucks.
safeguard. And so there
Mhm.
just like wasn't sufficient protections, kind of putting good money after bad, putting too much trust. I mean, I can get into it, but really it was a tough financial time too. So like, I don't want to give this person like any credit, like had they made better decisions at a different time of
Yeah.
their own life. But really ultimately it was, my brother had cancer at the time. I was in school, like going after a degree. And so I took my eye off the ball, so to speak.
There you go. Yeah.
And so, yeah. And the second part, like this person was like, everybody I talked to was like, this person's great. I know them. He's great. So like a vetted person.
Yeah.
But even and like, circumstances change. And so, yeah, that's just kind of how it went down. One of the big challenges I see with entrepreneurs is in partnerships and having unclear expectations or
Yeah.
wanting to really like the relationship trumps the business. But so that's the thing. If I had tighter controls in my business, I don't think I would have made the same mistake. But I
What a
was young.
great what yeah.
There's a lesson.
But what a great lesson to learn, right?
Yeah.
What a great lesson to learn. So, do you believe in partnerships now?
Do I believe in partnerships? I think inherently they make sense. You have to, like, if you're going to accomplish something big, you need to work with people. I think it's just like, would I bring in a business partner? Would I bring in an investor into my business? The answer is no. Am I gun shy? Maybe. But it's not what I need right now. But it works for some people, but it
Yeah.
also doesn't work for a lot of people too. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, I know that I want to dig into SME or what you're doing there, right?
mm,
Because I know that you are like the CEO and the senior strategic planning facilitator and all that kind of stuff. But what does that all mean? What is it that you're doing, right? Because I know that when I was reading your bio, you're recognized for guiding businesses to success and all of that. But what does that mean, Anthony? Break that down for us.
yeah. So, organizations, companies, so for profit, not for profit, they typically have like a planning cycle and they will do something that's called a strategic plan. So, if you're an entrepreneur,
Right.
you're probably familiar with a business plan. A
Mm-hmm.
strategic plan is basically the same thing. The nuance is when you're an entrepreneur or a small company, you maybe have yourself and one or two or three employees. Many of the companies that we work with are kind of 5 to 10 to 50 to 100 to 500 million and more. So they might have hundreds or thousands of employees. And so the reason a strategic plan is important is it helps the CEO, the leadership team, often, 7 to 10 to 15 people, all get on the same page in terms of where the
Right.
organization's at now, where they want to go, what are some of the main challenges that are going to get in the way, what do they need to prioritize in terms of all of these opportunities, and what are they tactically going to get done over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And then our company helps facilitate those conversations as an external, unbiased third party to help the conversation stay focused. And typically those happen over 2 or 3 days. And then our team also supports with implementation, accountability, leadership coaching towards the accomplishment of that vision.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen bigger companies, or let's say a company that has 7, 10, employees, whatever? Have you seen you're probably gonna say yes, chaos in some of these organizations? Because I feel like I've worked for pretty big organizations, right? And then I work for like startups. So, you kind of like have both, and startups can sometimes be a hot mess. But tell me about what like some of the bigger challenges that you've seen that you've kind of helped these organizations get through.
I mean, I would say the hot messes, the bigger organizations are typically the ones that are more of the hot mess because they
Yeah.
have more of a leeway to make mistakes. As a startup, you don't have a lot of like mistake space. So you're kind of like on top of it. It's where you start getting like
Mm,
layers of teams and, bigger budgets and a little bit more like room for error. I just did a webinar, today and yesterday on high functioning teams. And so like the opposite of that is low functioning teams or dysfunctional teams where there's no
yeah,
trust, there's
yeah,
no clarity, there's no focus. Often with like a 7 to 10 to 15 person company, it's easier because there's like the boss and the employees and they do it.
yeah,
The big challenge I see with like solopreneurs is holding on to too much of the business versus delegating it, and then thinking they can do everything.
yep, yep,
And then the other one is CEOs often thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, but not kind of looping their team into the decision or
yep.
like jumping into a decision 3 steps down the road, and the team is just trying to figure out like how to make it happen.
Oh, yeah, those are such fun days. You're bringing me right back. Whew. All right. So then when you're working with these teams, I think, one of the biggest things that is necessary is that a lot of when we bring in strategic companies or companies that do like evaluations of the teams and stuff like that, that it usually starts at the head, right?
Mhm.
So are you finding them receptive, especially when it comes to like the CEOs, COOs, things like that? Or are you finding it easier to work with the management instead? Or tell me about like the strategy behind what you feel is more effective.
I mean, starting at the top is always the most important because that's where like all of the decisions get made. The way we've positioned our business is like we don't sell to anybody, but we let them buy us, as in purchase our services. And so
Yeah.
they're not going to work with us if they don't want to work with us. And so like that's helpful. But really, like you could work with a management team, but if the senior leadership team's not on the same page, if the CEO and their people are not on the same page, it's kind of not all for naught, but it's a more
A
challenging
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, like, if you don't mind, like, just breaking it down a little bit. What does a first time going into these organizations look like, right? So I have a lot of, like I told you, entrepreneurs and stuff that listen to this show, right? So
Mm.
maybe they're considering, hey, you know what? I have a team of 7, 10, 12, whatever people. How do I start this process? So what does it look like when you go into these organizations to start this strategic planning with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first thing we do is we do a survey with the team, and the survey asks, key themes like, what are we doing well? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What should we be focusing? And the key thing to remember is we're not planning in the short term, like operational. We're thinking like strategic, big picture, kind of thirty
Okay.
thousand
Yeah.
feet. Where do we want the company to be in 3 years, not 3 minutes?
Right.
So we do a survey with the team to assess how aligned the team is. Like if
Mm,
success was a place, how would we know if we're going there? Because if we're not all going to the same place, we're going to different places. So we do a survey. We also interview members of the leadership team to kind of get a better understanding of how the team works. What are some of their priorities? Like just get a vibe of the team before we go in there. We send out the survey for the team to review. So like we don't need the answers. It's more for the team to say like, hey, what does my team think of where we're at? Do we think we're doing well? Do we think we're doing bad? And then we go through. Typically, it's 2 days in person, sometimes virtual, and we'll go to like often an offsite location. Teams like want to do a retreat. They say, hey, we're doing strategic planning, and then really just kind of taking a sense of like inside and out of the business and
mhm.
saying, hey, what does success look like to us? If we're doing $1 million, do we want to do $3 million in 3 years or 5 million or 10 million? It's not always about just like grow, 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 but it is about making sure that we're all aiming at the same thing and all prioritizing the same stuff so that we're not wasting our effort, we're not spreading our resources, or worse, we're not fighting. We call it the multiple destination trap. If you don't know where you're going, then different people are going to prioritize different things. You're not going
Yeah.
to make any decisions. And you're going to spin around in circles. Shiny
You
object syndrome, as it
Oh,
might
yeah.
be affectionately
Yeah.
known for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I call it squirrel, right? We see something,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
squirrel,
Yeah.
squirrel, it's just like go to the next thing. So talk to me about some of the challenges you might see because as you're talking, right? I'm thinking about a big organization I used to be a part of. And I remember I was always the outspoken one because that's just how I am.
You don't
But
say.
hey, my husband would agree with you. So but you know what I did notice, Anthony, is that some people didn't want to speak at all. Like they were just like really I don't want to say terrified, but very afraid of saying the truth or saying what was really happening because their like job would be on the line, or like they would really feel that. And I got that. I understood what they were coming from. I just didn't give a shit. But some people really, it really affected them. So how do you navigate that? Like, are these feedback things with you anonymous, or like tell me how that works?
So, I mean, it's you're all about straight talk, so I would expect no less. I think it comes down to a couple things, right? So there's personality, and then there's psychological safety and trust.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
like, you might be like, I actually find the smartest people say the least. And so, our job as facilitators, that's like our technical term, our job is to pull the right answers out of those people. Not
Right.
the right answers. We just need to pull them because they know what they say. They're just not loud. Like often
Right.
it's like the loud people that get the stage. The other reason we do a survey is it because it democratizes the answer. So some people don't like to, and this is kind of on the organizational behavior people side, some people don't like to share on their feet. They like processing time. So we
Uh-huh,
do a
uh-huh.
survey so that it can include those people. So that's like on the personality side, getting them to be prompted and then providing different mechanisms for them to share their feedback. On the like, I'm scared for my job kind of vibes, then that goes back down to like psychological safety. There's not enough trust. They don't feel safe sharing their
Yeah.
opinion. As a facilitator, I can't fix that per se, but it's really about creating an environment where there is trust, where they do recognize that their stuff is important. But yeah, organizations that have low psychological safety, low trust, that's where you have a lot of turnover. That's where you
Yeah.
have like resignation. And it's a really expensive problem. And it's one that we fix institutionally, but not just like, hey, we're trying to help one person. It's looking at the entire organizations and trying to put like the right environment for those people to be successful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you hear that?
I don't know what I'm hearing. It could be if you hear like little stomping. I really hope it's not my kid upstairs. That'd be a very powerful mic, but I don't know what the noise is. I don't
I
hear
don't
anything.
I don't know what the noise is either. That was weird. Okay. So I'm like, is that me? I don't know where that's
Yeah.
coming from. Okay. So and that's great. I think that I love that you're like really trying to give them different modalities on how to be able to be, right? To just like show up for them too, because it's going to make their business or their jobs feel better. Like you
Mm.
want to go to work, right? Because I've worked in toxic environments, right? And that's a very difficult thing to do. Like to go every day to work and a toxic environment is very challenging. So I love that you're stepping into, helping these people out. I want to hear, if you don't mind sharing, you don't have to share the names, of course, but I'd love to hear uh, something that you've seen that your organization was able to really help somebody turn it around. Do you have like one of those stories where you're like, this was this, but it became this?
Okay, so before I answer that, because I'll kind of need a bit of time, like my belief is I can change the world through strategic planning. So if we
Mhm.
do a good job with an organization, the leadership is on the same page. That means people have direction, which means they can be successful. If you're successful and you have direction, you're happy, which means that like you bring it home, which means you can like have a good family, which means you can have like a good community. So like
Mhm.
that's why at SME Strategy why we do this. I mean, we work with, I'm really trying to think of it because there's kind of two levels. One is we do the strategy session and we're kind of in and out and people feel good. There's other where it's like deeper, like we have an organization in North Carolina that we work with them for 3 years. And their way of like working together while it's not perfect is that they have so many more tools to be able to collaborate effectively as they're transitioning in their businesses. The one that we hear a lot is we would have never had a meeting this effective. And I know again that's kind of like a
That's good.
generalization, but we get like dozens of times. They just say we would have never made it through 20% of this had you not kept us focused.
That's
And
good.
so there's other organizations where I'm thinking of one manufacturer in the kind of northeast of the US, and we worked with them for a year and a half. And like by putting in the structures in place, like we gave them capacity to take the next leap. Like they didn't need to hire us forever because the
Right,
CEO had the
right.
direction, we did the heavy lifting, and then they were then able to give them enough time to hire people internally to get the work like done at depth. So like we don't want clients forever. We want them to let us go because we're trying to build capacity, not just have
Yeah.
them pay us forever.
Yeah. So are you doing all of this? I know you said you do both, video and in person. So when you have like big companies like this that are trying to have these meetings with you, do you find one more effective than the other? Do you sometimes just do video only? Like how does that look?
I mean, we have, if anybody's interested, look at virtual or in-person strategic planning on the internet. I think it's different strokes for different folks. Most people like in-person better.
Yeah.
It's like kind of more intense. It's more time constrained. You have a little bit more like leeway to like have informal conversations. Plus
Yeah.
there's dinners and team building and that kind of stuff. And then, I have folks in the US. I travel across the US. I'm going to Florida in a couple weeks. But I literally do like 10 to 15 to 20 trips a year.
Oh
And
wow.
then virtual is nice because it gives you like time and space in between. So instead of like 2 8-hour days that are like super intense, it's 5 3-hour sessions over a couple weeks. It's just easier for the calendar. It's a little bit more focused, but it's on Zoom. So it's, a little bit harder to stay focused because there's more distraction. But during like the COVID time, pandemic time where everybody was locked down, we were still able to do strategic planning for folks because it was done digitally. All of our implementation work is done digitally, so
Okay.
that we get teams that join on their computers or whatever, and we have those conversations because it's just easier than trying to like coordinate everybody to
Yeah.
do a 2 or 3 hour meeting when they're
Yeah.
dispersed.
Now, talk to me about like somebody who's listening right now. How do they know when they are needing strategic planning? Like, is there like some measures that they should be looking at, right? To say, okay, I think it's time to get Anthony and his team in here. We need strategic planning, right? So, because sometimes, I mean, honestly, sometimes you can just keep going blindly for years. Like you were saying, like there's a lot of turnover that's very expensive. Like at some point, you have to look at that kind of stuff and be like, okay, we are obviously doing something wrong here. But I'm
Mm.
just wondering, like, at what point can they start to really turn things around or what they should be looking at? What's the measure?
So I think everybody needs a strategic plan. So whether it's like your brand new business, a business plan, whether you're an established business with a couple employees or whatever, a strategic plan helps everybody. Whether
Yeah.
you need a facilitator or not, the question I would ask you, and so if you have a pen and paper, if you're reading this, it's like imagine it's 3 years from today. Okay, like today's date, write down today's date, 3 years, and say if I was 100% successful, how would I know? Like what would it look like, and describe it in vivid detail. And assuming you have a couple people leading your organization. So maybe, if you're the CEO or whatever, and you might have 2 or 3 or 4 like actual leaders, not like one leader and a bunch of staff, like really you have a team. Ask everybody else the same question. And if you have different answers, that's when you really need a team
Mm,
strategic planning session because
mm,
you're going to prioritize different decisions. You're going to move in different directions and you're fundamentally not aligned. We do have a scorecard online around our, like, it's called our one destination scorecard. It's 10 questions where you can say, hey, do we have a unified way of communicating? It also basically comes down to alignment. Are we 100% aligned in terms of how we work, our culture, and our plan? And if not,
mhm.
it's costing you money.
Yeah. You know what? That's awesome. And I love leadership anyway. I love like leadership and I love talking about all that because I think it's so important and we affect so many lives. Being a solopreneur and I have a small team, but being a solopreneur and stuff, I know how important it is for me to meet with them every week to communicate every day, to know what's going on. And that's always very important. And I'm thinking, for organizations that are even bigger than that, it is so important, Anthony, because right now we are, at least everything has changed since the big C word, right? Since since the big COVID, right? Everything's changed and leadership has changed and employees have changed and the way people connect with organizations have changed. Things have changed,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm sure that you've also had to pivot and change as well. Like, okay, this is what's happening in organizations. We need to pivot. We need to understand what's happening. And I've seen major big players leave organizations that have been there for a long time, and they just left. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So things have changed, Anthony. So how do you think these organizations that are now bringing in maybe a new generation of players or a new way of thinking, right? How do they start to work at retaining their people? Because people they're quitting. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a little harder now because inflation is so high. People are actually working 2 jobs or 3 jobs. But, I'm just wondering, how do we keep people? How do we keep them? How do we do that?
Yeah. I mean, how do we keep people? They have to make sure that they are fulfilled in their work, they like their work, and their work is paying the bills.
Yeah.
And so, like, people will quit jobs for a little bit more money, but they say like people don't quit jobs; they quit managers.
Yeah.
So equipping the managers. Um, they people want to win, so they need to know what winning looks like. So they need to
Yeah.
have like scorecards. They also need to know the rules, which means they need to have, like clear culture and expectations. Because if the rules keep changing, like you wouldn't play a game very
Yeah.
long if you didn't know the rules. And they need leadership, like they need space to grow in. Like one of the reasons, Nina, I believe you're a great leader is, whether culturally or otherwise, you seem to be like very explicit communicator. There's like you're clear about what you're saying, and
Yeah.
it's understandable, and I get where you're coming from. There, it's straight talk. Unfortunately, a lot of communicators, whether that's because of their cultural background, personal background, just their style, they aren't as explicit. There's a lot of context needed. And so it's open to interpretation. And so when it's open to interpretation, you never know where you sit. When someone's like talking to you and you're like, oh, that was kind of okay. And you're like, well, are you happy or are you not happy? And so like you as a leader you're probably very direct. You are very direct. Whereas
Yeah,
other
I am.
folks aren't direct. And so it makes it really hard for people to follow them. And so
Yeah.
it's been said that a leader with no followers is just going for a walk. So
Yeah.
why people quit is because they're not following anybody because
Yeah.
there's nobody leading them.
Yeah.
Um, the other consideration for, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, there's like 5, 6 generations in the workforce, and everybody wants to do work differently. Maybe you need to say skibbity toilet or say aura points for somebody who's like 18 years old in your organization. Meanwhile, somebody 60, they value loyalty. They don't want any bullshit, pardon my French. And then
Yep.
somebody who's 40, they're looking for that next opportunity. They want to leverage technology. Somebody 30 in their organization thinks they knows all of the answers and they're going to try to revolutionize, but they need mentorship and they need to slow their roll. So like you as a leader have a harder job than
Yeah.
ever. And that's why it's so important to like build as much structure in place so you're not, trying to pull your hair out every day.
Yeah, and I love that. You just like really nailed it on all those different generations and what you think. I'm thinking about my process too. That's exactly how I was through all those times. But I really love this. I love this conversation. I love what you're doing. I just want to see our organizations build stronger leadership and, to understand that just because you put somebody in a leadership role, you shouldn't just leave them there. Like you should really nurture that. You should really, help them along because one of the things I've seen is they either do a lot of shifting in organizations where they're changing everybody's positions all the time, and that just makes you unsteady. It makes you, it makes you feel like you're not good enough or smart enough. Like this imposter syndrome comes in, and when you do that a lot, like it does feel bad. It really does. Like so I was speaking to a leader who was like, "Oh, we always change their offices like every year." I'm like, "Why do you do that?" "Oh, just to keep them on their toes." I said, "No, not a
Yeah.
good idea. Not a good idea." I said, and they're, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, because you're shifting them from office to office. There's no anchor. There's nothing for them to say, this is my space. They're like, but it isn't their space." I'm like, exactly. So they're gonna be gone very soon. And sure enough, most of the people are gone. You know what I mean? Because you can't do that to people,
Yeah,
But
we call it, we
yeah,
say be trauma informed. Like
yeah,
human beings are like, they're not objects and they have all of these like feelings and thoughts. And so, like,
yeah.
as a leader, you need to be aware of like what sets people off and then what helps them be successful. And changing
Yeah.
offices every year is probably not going to make them successful.
Yeah. And you have to be empathetic to people too. Like, if you're somebody who's maybe never had children, but you have people who have children, don't think like their life just like they don't have to take care of their kids. Like if their kid is sick and they're like, my kid is sick. Well, I'm sorry, you got to be here. Like, what are you doing? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like they're human beings. So there's so many aspects to this, Anthony. And I'm glad that you guys are going in there and saying, okay, let's really talk and break this down. And honestly, I really wish that every organization would do this. I wish every organization would call for a strategic person to come in. And unfortunately, they don't, Anthony, because I've worked with a few. They do not, And sometimes me as a coach, I've gone through like neurolinguistic programming and positive intelligence and all that kind of stuff. So my team was behind me 1,000%. Like every time I'd be like, all right, guys, they would like jump off a cliff. You know what I'm saying? Because I said, let's go, let's jump off this cliff. Why? Because I learned to develop that personal relationship with them, but also they knew where I stood, right? Just
Mhm.
to your point about being clear. But when I left, so did many, right? Unfortunately. But the good part is that I also instilled in them the values of the company, where we stood, how we do things together, as a team. But when nobody else is doing it, it's hard. This is where Anthony comes in, right? Because if one team is thriving and all the other teams around it is not, something has to be done. Because when that leader leaves, so will everybody else. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but it happens, right?
Absolutely. I believe
Yeah.
that there is a bad management tax.
Yeah.
So if you are having a high turnover, first of all, Nina, I love what you're saying, and I think your people were grateful for you that got to work with you. It's like people don't think of the cost. They only think of the cost of hiring somebody. They don't
Yeah.
think the cost of not hiring somebody. So if you have to replace 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 employees every year, that's costing you like
Yeah.
100, 200
A
grand.
lot.
So
Yeah.
you're like, okay, well, I don't want to spend 20 grand on a consultant. Meanwhile, you're still spending the 150 like replacing these people. It's like
Yep.
you're one way or the other, you're going to pay.
Yep.
So choose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what it is too, Anthony. I think a lot of CEOs need to get out of their own ego. You need to get out of your own ego.
That's a whole other podcast. We could
Yeah,
talk
that's a
about
lot. Yeah, we could
ego.
do that because
Yeah.
we could go in there. But Anthony, you are freaking awesome. I love this conversation. I love what you're doing, and I want those who are listening seriously listening, y'all. Okay, because we get a lot of downloads. We got 150,000 downloads. Like we get a lot of people listen. I want them to understand, Anthony, that if you want to see yourself thrive, you got to bring in the pros. You got to bring someone else who sees your blind spots. Get out of your own freaking ego, step off the damn horse, and like start to realize that you were once in a position that was maybe in their position, right? And so you felt certain ways too. And I think, Anthony, that having you come and your team come and then just like help them thrive, get over yourself. You're not all that. You know what I mean? Like, let's all work together for the goal of the company, whatever that company is. Because if it has a lot of employees, that means they're doing something right or there's
Mm.
something that people want. So let's do it right. Right. So, Anthony, go ahead and give us how people can contact you, work with you, all that kind of great stuff.
Awesome. So first and foremost, like Nina, I know you're like committed to like pouring into your people and supporting them, and me too. So almost everything we have, like tools wise, like you can get it for free. So if there's anything like strategy or leadership related, Google
Love it.
SME
Love it.
strategy. Like I don't want cost to be an issue. And sometimes there's big issues. So SMEstrategy.net, that's where you can find me, Anthony C. Taylor on LinkedIn. We can come in, lead a strategy workshop for your team. But honestly, like just having the conversation around, are we on the same page? Are we clear? Is the first step. And then,
Mhm.
if it makes sense, happy to support. But Nina, just such a pleasure chatting with you. Like I love what you're doing. Keep it up. And,
Thank you.
grateful for what you're doing for your people because I'm sure they appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you, man. I really, really do because I love leadership. I really do. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur now and I love being on my own, but I really enjoyed leading others to success. I loved it. Right. And so
Yeah.
I love these kind of conversations because like I said, I have a lot of like entrepreneurs and CEOs and stuff that listen to the show. And I think that, sometimes we just get in our own freaking way. We just get in our own way. And so you need somebody like you, Anthony. So thank you for being here and sharing all the wisdom. I truly am grateful. Thank
And
you. Thank
pleasure's all
you.
mine, Nina.
All right, y'all, you heard him, right? Get on to his website and make sure go to SME and make sure that you actually download those free tools. At least get started. At least get started. Because if you can get started that way, you're going to see like you're not going to move forward if you're constantly having this divide and people are leaving and you're constantly retraining and constantly showing people the culture and all that kind of stuff. I'm telling you, it just makes it so much harder. It doesn't have to be this hard. If you just take some of that budget and invest it in somebody who can come in and a team that can come in and really strategize with you, you're going to make it farther. I promise you that, because that is the way it works. When you have somebody who can see your blind spots, then you're no longer blind. Okay. All right. That's all. I'm going to just leave it right there. Thank you guys for hanging out with me and Anthony. I love you guys so much. I'm going to link all of his information below so that you can get your together. Okay. Thank you guys for being here. Neena Perez, straight talk, no sugar added. Until next time.